Blog Talk Radio.
Broadcasting from deep within occupied territory on the far left coast, you're listening to On the Move with Mack, Worley III.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and members of the Mack Pack, I'm Mack, Worley III, and this is On the Move, the show that attempts to inspire you to stand up for your rights. The date is June 22nd, 2014, and we have a really good show in store for you today. Around 5:20 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we're going to be joined by special guest and Libertarian Party candidate Tim Turner. We're going to be talking about the issues, talking about his campaign. We're also going to be talking about whatever else comes up, so feel free to call in with topics of your own. Anything that you like to discuss is on the table. We'll be taking your listener calls and reading your emails. If you'd like to join the conversation today, please give us a call. The number to the show is 619-924-0986. Again, that's 619-924-0986. Our phone lines are open, and we're also going to be taking your emails. You can email us at talk@onthemoveshow.com. We got our website, onthemoveshow.com. Don't forget to check us out here at blogtalkradio.com/onthemoveshow. Don't forget to follow us on there. We got a Facebook page, facebook.com/onthemoveshow. You can like us on there. You can subscribe to us on youtube.com/onthemoveshow. And follow us on twitter.com/onthemoveshow. So, man, this has been a busy news week. This has been a really crazy news week. We've got the Benghazi scandal heating up. It's been heating up over the last few weeks, but now especially it's been brought to light that we've captured one of the terrorists that are responsible for the attack. And as you all know, Iraq is still on fire, and now we're talking about sending 300 Green Berets to Iraq. 300. So this is the kind of news week that journalists train for their whole lives, you know. I'm in the gym the whole year with my sweatbands on. I'm reading articles and going over monologues for news days just like this. So luckily, you all are in the hands of a true broadcasting professional, and I know that you expect nothing less than journalistic excellence, and that's why you listen to this show. So hold on to the seat of your pants because we're about to begin. Today's first segment we like to call This Day in History.
This Day in History.
Because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
Yesterday,
country can do for you.
Mr. Gorbachev teared down this wall.
A date which will live in infamy.
We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
All right. On this day in history, on June 22nd, now this is according to Yahoo News, in 1870, which is 144 years ago, the United States Department of Justice was created. In 1940, 74 years ago, during World War II, Adolf Hitler gained a stunning victory as France was forced to sign an armistice 8 days after German forces overran Paris. In 1944, which is 70 years ago, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed the Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944, more popularly known as the GI Bill of Rights. In 1964, 50 years ago, in a pair of rulings, the U.S. Supreme Court decided that Henry Miller's novel, The Tropic of Cancer, and the French film The Lovers were not obscene. So this was ruled on by the Supreme Court, obscenity. In 1977, 37 years ago, John N. Mitchell became the first former U.S. Attorney General to go to prison as he began serving a sentence for his role in Watergate in the cover-up, and he was released after about 19 months. Let's actually relate that to today here for a second. I know this is this day in history, but you know, right now we have a attorney general that is currently running amok. It's lawless. You know, he's being asked to investigate himself. And, of course, after investigating himself, he finds that he's committed no crimes and he's done nothing wrong. So yeah, Attorney General Eric Holder, Operation Fast and Furious, where they were running guns over the border to Mexico in an attempt to basically track where these guns are going. but they're responsible for killing hundreds of Mexicans. And, Brian Terry, Border Agent Brian Terry, died from one of these weapons as well. So, I mean, this is stuff that has happened before. We have actually sent a U.S. former Attorney General to prison for role in a cover-up. Now, obviously, we have a cover-up going on right now. We have Attorney General Eric Holder. He's responsible for covering up all the paperwork in Operation Fast and Furious. And we also have President Obama that's used executive privilege to cover up the scandal that's going on with that as well. So, this goes all the way up to the top. And just for the record, executive privilege is only supposed to be used in cases that, it could be harmful to national security. So someone please explain to me how gun running into Mexico, finding out what happened, is somehow going to be harmful to national security. Are we at war with Mexico? I wasn't aware of that. Is there something else going on here? We need to know. We need to find out what's going on. And Attorney General Eric Holder, not willing to release the paperwork on it. Executive privilege handed to him from Obama, and the cover-up continues. Anyway, moving back into the This Day in History segment, in 1992, which is 22 years ago, wow, 1992 is 22 years ago, that's crazy, the U.S. Supreme Court in versus the city of St. Paul unanimously ruled that hate crime laws that ban cross-burning and similar expressions of racial bias violated free speech rights. So here's another thing that we can kind of relate here. What about the guy in Benghazi that he was not in Benghazi. He was arrested for the video he created that supposedly created the whole attack in Benghazi. It was a spontaneous protest to this video. This man was actually put in jail. He's currently serving, and let's also point out that the stuff that he's in jail for right now is unrelated to his video. It's unrelated to any charges for that. He's in jail right now for a year. I believe it's been over a year now for violating his probation. So there's been reports that this seems like a bit of a harsh punishment for probation violations, but we have Hillary Clinton on record saying that she was going to go after this guy, and he's in jail now because of it. So, hate crimes, it's okay to burn crosses and other similar acts of racial bias, because that's your free speech. You have every right to do that. But this guy can't make a video. This video ultimately has led him to go to jail. So I find it a bit ridiculous. But anyway, we're moving on today. If you want to join today's conversation, give us a call. The number to the show is 619-924-0986. The Mack Pack lines are open. And you can also join the conversation today by emailing us at talk@onthemoveshow.com. And at this point, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/onthemoveshow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
And we're back. I appreciate y'all sticking with us. Don't forget, we have a store on our website, OnTheMoveShow.com. You can click the shop link on our homepage, and we got hundreds of products for sale on there, ranging from T-shirts to freeze-dried food to books that I would recommend reading, bumper stickers, and there's so much more stuff on there. So anything you guys would like to purchase on there will go towards making our program bigger and better. We really appreciate your support, so thank you very much for that. But, like I said, there's a ton of different stuff going on in the news today. But, the very first segment that I would like to start out with is Ask Mack segment that we have where, I have basically opened it up for you guys to ask me any question that you have on your mind. So if you have a question, feel free to ask it in several different ways. You can email us here at Talkin' on the Move Show. Of course, you can call in at 619-924-0986. You can post your questions at facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow, or you can tweet us at OnTheMoveShow. But when you do that, make sure that you include the hashtag AskMack so I can find you. And at that point, we're going to go ahead and start the next segment here. Here we go.
It's time to ask Mack. You've got a question? He's got the answer. Time to ask Mack. When you got a question, time to ask Mack.
All right, we have a question that was asked from Christian on Twitter, and he's basically asking my thoughts on an advertisement that was put out by the Leadership Conference Education Fund, where they claim that 2.6 million working dads would benefit if the minimum wage was raised. And, things like that are pretty comical to me anyway. I find it hilarious when they take numbers and they basically put out propaganda. And basically, let's say, okay, there's 2.6 million working dads in America right now that are on minimum wage. I'm assuming that's what they are getting their number from. And it would make sense. 2.6 million working dads currently on minimum wage. Yeah, if it was raised, those people could be perceived as benefiting from the minimum wage being increased. But let's also let's not forget here that out of that 2.6 million, let's say people are making $10 an hour right now, and a company can afford to pay $10 an hour for, let's say, 5 employees. Actually, let's make it 10 to make it easier here, okay? Easier for math. But let's say this company can pay 10 people $10 an hour, but suddenly, if the costs are now $15 an hour, and they're forced by the government to pay these people more than they're worth, really, I mean, that's what minimum wage is forcing forcing companies, which is people, forcing people to pay people more money than they're worth. So, out of these 10 employees that are making $10 an hour, this employer may be forced now to fire, let's say, 2 or 3 of them. So now 3 of those people are unemployed. They're not making any money. They're not benefiting in any way. In fact, now they are being hurt. They're being negatively affected by the minimum wage. Yet 7 of those people may be making more money, but 3 of them are now making less money. They're making no money. So now those people are looking for a job that they're negatively impacted. And not to mention, what if this company just decides to move and go across state lines to another place? Now, what if all 10 of these employees now are making $0? So this 2.6 million working dads that would supposedly benefit if the minimum wage was increased, I think it's deceptive in nature, because you don't know out of that. I mean, half of those people could be hurt. What's the ratio that's acceptable here? If 1.3 million of the 2.6, half are negatively impacted somehow from this increase, is that an acceptable level? Hey, 1.3 million people, they actually were benefited from it. So 1.3 million, those got hurt. But I mean, is that a good ratio? What is the level that makes sense with this? On top of which, and let's point out the fact that even if 2.6 million working dads did not lose their minimum wage jobs, and they continue to work making $15 an hour, that's all fine and good. But now the cost for everything is now substantially increased. Everything now costs more money. It costs more money to do everything nowadays, to get your food. Everybody's got to pay their employees more and more money, which those costs, they're not just absorbed by the company. You understand? These costs are passed along to you guys, the consumer. So with that in mind, these 2.6 million working dads that supposedly benefited are really where they started off to begin with, because everything went up. All the costs went up along with their salary. So who cares if they're now making $15 an hour if they have to pay an equal amount more for everything else that they were getting? They're really exactly where they left off. But again, the people that lost their jobs because of this are even worse now than they started before. Even if they just now have no job, now they have no job and everything costs more. Does this make sense? I think this makes sense to me anyway. And I really appreciate Christian for joining our conversation and for getting on the move today. Again, if you would like to ask your question, you can ask it in several different ways. Again, I'll answer it on the air to the best of my ability. And the best way would be to call in 619-924-0986, or you can email us at talk@OnTheMoveShow, or you can post your questions at facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow, or you can tweet us at OnTheMoveShow. And make sure that you include the hashtag AskMack so I can find you if you do that on Twitter. So, all right, at this point, we're going to go ahead and take another commercial break. And when we get back, we're going to have Tim Turner, the Libertarian candidate. He's going to join us, and we're going to have a conversation about his campaign, some of the issues, and whatever else comes up. So feel free to call in. Again, that's 619-924-0986. We'll be right back.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/onthemoveshow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
And we're back. I appreciate you all sticking with us. All right, at this point, we're going to bring Libertarian Party candidate Tim Turner on the line. Hey, Tim, are you there?
I'm here.
Hey, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, so let's go ahead and just dive right in here. Very first question I have for you, sir. What district and what position are you running for?
District 48, Position 2. That's up in the Redmond, Bellevue, Kirkland area.
Okay, all right. And who are you running against right now?
I'm running against Joan McBride. She's former mayor of Kirkland. This is Rodney Tom's district, if you know who he is. He's a Republican who became a Democrat, and then he made a bunch of Democrats mad by voting with the Republicans on a bunch of issues. Joan McBride was originally selected to run against Rodney Tom in the Senate race, but he's dropping out of the race and retiring, and so Joan is dropped from the Senate race down to Position 2, and so I'm running against her in Position 2.
I see. Okay.
That's not a mouthful there.
Yeah. So as far as this though, is there an incumbent in the position right now, or are they running again?
No, it's not. It's an open seat.
Okay.
The former incumbent is actually running for Senate.
I see. Okay. So it's an open seat. It's fair game right now. Anybody could get it. As far as your competition over there, the person you're running against, what are some things that you guys disagree on?
Well, to tell you the truth, I'm not entirely sure what she believes on. I've been to her website. I haven't seen any issues on her issues page. All I've seen is she has a list of about 100 endorsements of different people, different socialites who've endorsed her. Looking at her campaign finances, she's the top of her list of who's donating to her campaign. All of those donations are maxed out, at almost $2,000 each. So she's taken an awful lot of big money. On my campaign, I don't take corporate donations. I don't take special interest money from any organization. So we have a difference on campaign funding there. I don't believe that the government is there to rub shoulders and pat people on the back. The government is there to protect people's rights. I can assume that she's probably a little bit to the left of Rodney Tom. And then I know as mayor of Kirkland, one of the things she does talk about on her website is as mayor of Kirkland, she annexed 35,000 people into the city of Kirkland, which, is usually one of the ways that governments like to get more power. Let's expand our tax base by giving ourselves more control over more people. which I'm a strong believer that the more local control is, the better.
Yes, sir. So, all right. So as far as some big issues, I know within the Libertarian Party, and I love this about the party, is that the Libertarian Party, for example, they don't like to take handouts from companies, donations from companies, corporate entities, things like that. As far as some other issues, like what are some big issues that you run on right now?
My big issues are economic freedom. That's really my biggest focus. I'm a candidate which people can vote for if they want economic freedom, but they also want social freedom. They want to protect the marijuana laws that we have in the state. They want to protect they want to defend. I don't want to use the word defend, but they want people to be able to marry whom they choose. Right? Yeah. I will support those things. I will support people to be able to marry who they choose. I will support people being able to smoke what they choose, and I will support people's economic freedom to run your business the way you choose, without the government trying to shut you down, without the government trying to regulate you out of business, without the government trying to tax you out of business. The economy is really one of my bigger focuses, and that's probably where I'll be spending most of my time in Olympia.
Okay. Well, I'd like to know specifically what exactly would you do to help the economy in Washington?
Well, we need to deregulate. We've got an awful lot of regulations on businesses telling them how to run their business, and most of the people in Olympia, even if they've ever run a business, they're not an expert on every kind of business that there is. One of the people from my district is a former Microsoft manager. He doesn't know anything about making airplanes. Why is he making rules and laws which apply to how Boeing makes airplanes? It doesn't make sense for people who aren't absolute experts in running a business to run other people's business for them.
Yeah,
another big
seeing that kind of stuff in Washington, D.C., where we got bureaucrats who are making regulations and things and passing laws that affect everybody, and they have absolutely no idea the implications because they don't have any experience in it. They're bureaucrats. Some of these are lifelong bureaucrats, been in Congress 40 years.
Mm-hmm. There's another big thing is we've got to end corporate subsidies. The whole idea of stimulating the economy that doesn't work. And you're shutting down one person's business in order to fund some other's business. And that's not the purpose of the government. Your company should succeed because it offers a good product, and it should fail because it offers a bad product. The government shouldn't come in and say, well, this politician favors you, so you're going to succeed whether you sell a good product or not. That's not how we should run the economy, and it's an exceedingly wasteful process. It causes an awful lot of economic friction, which is part of the reason for our recession, is because we're pumping money from good, healthy companies into bad, failing companies. We're giving a lifeblood transfusion from a company which is healthy to a company which is failing, and all we're doing is we're subsidizing failure. We're not making that failing company any more successful. It's still continuing to fail.
Exactly. Yeah, and that right there, I think the government should not be in the business of picking winners and losers. If your company is failing, there's probably something to do with either the way that you're managing it or the product itself. If it's a good product, it'll sell itself. You really don't have to do much to it. If you're working hard and you're doing everything that you need to do, the product will sell itself. And people will find your product and buy the product. If it's an innovative product, people will want it. People will need it. Things like that. But the government trying to basically prop up these failing industries. In my opinion, I have a major problem with that. I absolutely disagree with the government picking who's going to make it and who's not going to make it. And it's basically theft. In my opinion, you start taking taxpayer money to fund a company.
It's slavery. It's not theft. It's slavery. We pay almost a 10% income tax here in Washington State. The average person works 5 days a week. 10%, 5 days a week, that's the first half of Monday. You get up, you go to work, you work from the beginning of work to lunch on Monday, you're working for the government. That's slavery.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just to put it mildly.
I agree. To me, first of all, I would like to just mention to our listeners that you did write a book. You are very knowledgeable on economics as well. But can you talk a little bit about your book that you authored?
Okay, that's the other thing that I want to do for the economy when I'm in Olympia. My book is called The Profit Bargaining Ratio Theory, which is it's kind of a convoluted title. It's actually meant to be more for the layperson, not the complete imbecile, but it's more for the layperson, and it talks about the economy, and it talks about this principle in the economy. When we trade, when we do business with each other, there's some benefit created. We call that profit, and it could be monetary profit. It could just be happiness. But there's some benefit that's created when two people interact with each other voluntarily, right? And that benefit is split between us somehow. It could be split 50-50. It could be split 90-10. It could be split 60-40. But that split of that benefit, that split of that profit, that's the profit bargaining ratio. It's the ratio of profit between us.
And what you're referring to the actual what I think is valued of whatever we trade.
What you think is value. That's a huge misassumption that a lot of economists make. That's where John Maynard Keynes went wrong. That's a major portion of where Marx went wrong, is they assumed that their definition of value was the one that mattered. And what matters is the individual, the people who are in the transaction. We have different values. We trade because we have different values. The analogy I like to use, you've got a peanut butter jelly sandwich. I've got a tuna sandwich. You like tuna. I like peanut butter. We both have something that we don't want that much. But, any idiot can see that, if we trade, we'll both be better off. We'll both have more of what we want, right?
Exactly.
And that's where that benefit is created because of our differences of opinion.
Mm-hmm. And I was actually listening to your appearance on the Johnny Rocket Launchpad. By the way, to my listeners, feel free to check out his show. He's a very entertaining show, JohnnyRocketLaunchpad.com. But I like the example that you guys created on there, and I kind of would like to expand on that as far as, let's say I have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and you have half of a tuna sandwich, okay? Let's say I'm allergic to peanut butter and jelly, so like I have a peanut allergy, okay? So that's valued at hardly anything for me because I don't want it. I'm allergic to it. That thing can literally kill me. But your half of a tuna sandwich, that's a lot more valuable to me. Even though it's only half, I can actually eat that. So we may be trading, and you may be getting more of the item itself, but that item that I had was valued a lot less than what your tuna is now valued at for me. So I really like that.
We both benefited.
Exactly. We both benefited, and the profit ratio, for me, that would be 50-50 if I was allergic to peanut butter. Even though I got less of it, it's still an equal value to me because that one was valued at nothing for me.
Well, the key point is that we're both benefiting, and that in a true free market, you can never have something forced on you that's to your detriment. So any transaction you engage in will benefit you in the long run because anything that doesn't benefit you, you can just veto. You can just say, I'm not participating in that. I'm not buying that. But this ratio, this ratio between us, the 50-50 ratio, the 60-40 ratio, that's not really determined by you and I, the two people who are making the trade. That's actually determined by the overall productivity level in society. Because what happens is, let's say I'm going to offer you that sandwich, and I'm saying, well, I'm only going to offer you the crust of my tuna sandwich, because I'm evil and I'm greedy and I'm selfish and I want as much as I can possibly get. That, and you're going to say, well, he's only offering me the crust of a sandwich, and this other person's offering me an apple, and you're going to go with that other person. So if I'm offering you this ridiculous 90-10 deal where you're only getting 10% profit, and someone else is offering you a 40-60 deal, you're going to go with the 40-60 deal over my deal. So if I want your business, I will have to improve the quality of the transaction that I offer to you. That's how competition works. That's what competition does. Is if I want to compete for your business, I have to offer you at least as good as a deal as everyone else is giving you. And that deal is ultimately determined by the overall productivity level of society. It's what society is able to produce. It's the number of cabbages, it's the number of houses, it's the number of cars that we're able to produce with a given amount of time. And what you see in the economy is time and time again. I know you were talking about the minimum wage just before I came on. Mm-hmm. Government tries to change that balance. They say, that we have to have a 50-50 ratio. We have to have a more fair ratio. And what happens is when you change that ratio, the economy reacts. The economy adapts. It's not just this vegetable that's sitting there. It's a dynamic ecosystem, and it changes that ratio back. And it's driven. The fundamental driving force of the economy is the independent will of 7 billion people who live on this planet. There's no government which can override that. That ratio will go back approximately to what it was before. It will be actually, when it goes back, it will be slightly less in favor of the people it was before. It will always favor the people who were in charge before.
And
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense to me. You know, that's the real thing, is that the people who these laws are trying to help, these laws that try to regulate and govern fairness, you know, they typically end up hurting the people that they were trying to help to begin with. And you know, for me, I personally think that you know, the Democrats who are trying to force these laws on people, they actually know that this isn't helping anyone. I think it's one of those things where it's, you know, you create the problem and then become the solution to the problem, you know, that you created in the first. That's just my opinion, but you know, I definitely agree.
I think there are some politicians that are oblivious to it. I think some don't care, and I think, unfortunately, there are people out there, and poor people vote for Democrats. It's in the Democrats' best interest to create as many poor people as possible, and I think there are politicians who actually do intentionally do that. I hope there aren't that many of them, but I think there are some who realize that their economic policies keep people in poverty, because those people keep voting the same way. Which, you know, I think it's unfortunate, but I think that does happen.
So as far as some of the other issues here, I want to you know, quickly run through some things here and basically ask your opinion on some other topics here. First and foremost, you know, for me, I'm a big Second Amendment guy. What are your thoughts on open carry, concealed carry, constitutional carry? What do you think about that?
Well, you absolutely have a constitutional right to defend, to carry a weapon, to defend yourself, not just from, you know, burglars or criminals or whatever, but from the government. I mean, realistically, the purpose of the Second, you know, not to sound crazy, tinfoil hat time, but the purpose of the Second Amendment is so that you can shoot politicians when they get out of hand. That's the point. That's what the founding fathers were thinking. They'd just gone and shot up a bunch of tax assessors and soldiers. That's, you know, the context of the revolution, and they wrote the Constitution. They said that people have the right to remain armed, and the purpose of that was to keep the government honest. Because if you don't have the right to rise up against the government, then the right to protest means nothing. And if you don't have the right to protest, then the government is no longer a government of the people, for the people, or by the people. So, you know, we need a heavily armed civilian populace, you know, to keep the government in check and keep it honest, so that it continues to answer to the people.
And I totally agree with that. You know, I'd like to play devil's advocate for a minute here, because I'm curious what you would say to this. I heard an argument basically stating that, you know, that in fact is why, and this is coming from a Democrat, mind you, the Second Amendment was put there as a hedge against tyranny from our government, which is exactly why they were arguing that it needed to be repealed, because the U.S. government has tanks, we have, you know, helicopters, we got nuclear weapons, and there's no way that we could possibly win if we ever were trying to fight, you know, a tyrannical government. So with that, they were justifying, oh yeah, we need to get rid of the Second Amendment. I'm just curious what your thoughts on that is.
Well, if I can play devil's advocate to your devil's advocate, you know, why can't people have, you know, nuclear weapons and to defend themselves against the government? And of course, you know, the logical, rational answer to that is at some point you pose a clear and present danger to other people around you. You know, most people don't have the knowledge, the money, the resources to safely maintain, you know, nuclear weapons. And besides that, a nuclear weapon is kind of an anti-population weapon. It's not something that you can specifically target against the government. You know, I'd be much more comfortable with people having, you know, fighter jets with anti-aircraft missiles than I would against, you know, a nuclear bomb. But really, realistically, that idea that we can't fight back against the government is nonsense. I'm not proposing that we necessarily legalize people having tanks and fighter jets. It's kind of just you know, sort of a devil's advocate. You're devil's advocate, but we could potentially wage a guerrilla war against the United States government. They did it in Vietnam. You know, look what's happening in Iraq right now. The government does not have infinite resources. Ultimately, the military is a pretty pro-America. They're a pretty pro-Second Amendment, you know, group of people. They're not going to be in a long-haul war against, you know, their neighbors. You know, these politicians' homes are in our country. It's not like we'd have to go overseas to go get them. So, you know, I think Americans, you know, just American citizens, could significantly win a war against, you know, even a well-organized federal government.
Absolutely. And, you know, I definitely agree. I mean, let's just simply look at, for example, World War II. The Japanese did not invade America for one major reason, and it was because that they were afraid that there would be, a rifle hidden behind every blade of grass. That was their words. That they were concerned that every man, woman, and Boy Scout would have a rifle and use it against them, and they'd be fighting a guerrilla war that they had no real desire to get into. And that same situation would apply here. I mean, they wouldn't know who to fight, and not to mention, there's 330 million Americans last I checked, and the population of our military is significantly smaller than that population. There's just no way that they could fight that kind of war substantially. That's my argument to it anyway, is that, look, go ahead.
We'd surround military bases, classic siege tactics. And, the military base draws a major amount of support from the surrounding community. You'd starve them out. The politicians' homes are here in our country. How many dictatorial tyrants are going to sit there while their homes are burning? The whole reason they do this stuff is for their own personal power and their own personal, name recognition. They wouldn't light their own country on fire for that purpose.
Mm-hmm. Man, yeah, I know that we've got some major tinfoil on our heads right now, but I'd like to put a little bit more on, and I'm curious. What are your thoughts about the NSA spying scandal and Edward Snowden and all that? Do you think Edward Snowden is a hero, or do you think he's a traitor?
Well, I'm going to be cautious and political here. I haven't done a whole lot of research on Edward Snowden and actually what he's released to the public. So I'm not going to sit here and render judgment on him. If he has revealed actual strategic weaknesses of the United States government in its military operations, that is a crime against the United States. On the other hand, when he exposes wrongdoing by the government against the people of the United States, those are mitigating circumstances. So I don't want to put him in a hero camp or a villain camp. I think the man deserves a fair trial based on the actual evidence that's not politicized. And the people aren't out there finding a political axe against him or trying to get elected based on what he did. He should be judged, based on his actual actions, actual, really truly military classified sensitive information that he's released, with very strong mitigating bias, towards the public service he's done by letting us know the exact extent of the NSA spying on us.
Well, as far as what he did, it was actually against the law. I mean, he did violate the law, but, as Thomas Jefferson once said, and I agree with, when tyranny becomes law, resistance becomes a duty.
Well, and Frank violated the law. The world is full of examples. I mean, I could go on and listing examples of people who violated the law that were doing the right thing. Rosa Parks violated the law. I don't even need to list the examples. We all know the examples of people who violated the law but did the morally right thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as far as the NSA as well, let me just, since, I got kind of the political answer from you for the Edward Snowden thing, let's talk about the NSA itself. Do you think that the National Security Agency should be broadly sweeping and scraping all of the communications from every human electronic communication in the world, mind you, and basically storing it in a big database without a warrant or without any probable cause or reasonable suspicion that anybody has committed a crime? They're just data mining it all. Do you think they should be able to do that? And do you agree with that?
No. So okay. I'm opposed to, and I'm opposed to NSA spying on just the general world at large, the American people at large. You can make the excuse that, okay, we've got to spy on a couple of terrorists, but if you're just broadly sweeping the people, you're not even close to that mark. You're way over the line.
Exactly. Yeah. For me, it's kind of upsetting because we have a Fourth Amendment there for a specific reason. Unlawful search and seizure, and this to me, if you're not getting a warrant, if you're not getting a judge to check it out and say, okay, yeah, this guy's a suspect, all right, well, we need to find out what he's doing and listen to his phone calls. I have no problem with that. If a judge signs off on a warrant, go for it. Spy on that guy like crazy. I don't care, as long as the judge signs off on it and it all is on the up and up. But when we start just listening to every single human communication, I mean, that's insane. That to me, that is the definition of tyranny. They're literally in our houses. That they're reading our emails or we know that now that they're able to just basically turn on our phones and listen to us. it's an eavesdropping device in our own home now. I mean, it's unbelievable the amount of stuff that they're able to do, and I am adamantly against the NSA spying. But let's bring things back a little local here. I know this has been a big debate in Oregon, and this is already something we have here in Washington State. We have a law that allows illegal immigrants to get driver's license, and I was curious what your thoughts on that are.
Well, that's kind of a mixed issue. So I'm pro-immigration. I think we could use more people coming to our country, buying products from our stores, working for our businesses. From all of my economics research, I haven't seen a strong case. I've seen a very emotional case, but I haven't seen a strong logical case that illegal immigrants are stealing our jobs. So in general, I'm highly approve the idea of people coming to America for a better life. On the other hand, if you're coming to our country, you should be coming through the legal process. We should make that legal process a lot easier, but you should come through the legal process. And I'm still kind of thinking through this issue a little bit on a couple of things. American taxpayers should not foot the bill for citizens of other countries. That's what their country is for. We shouldn't be taking money. We shouldn't be taking our money that we've gathered from our taxpayers for poor people living in our country and shipping it to other countries. Those countries should be doing it, and we should be taking care of the people here, who are part of our social contract. It's a little bit of a mixed bag because if somebody is working in the above board economy and they're paying taxes, there's kind of a you're paying into the system. I am concerned about people who just jump across the border and suddenly magically have access to massive financial payments from taxpayers who've been here for years paying into the system. So I'm kind of more. We should at least have a time threshold, and you should at least be a taxpayer before you start collecting money on social programs. And in general, I'm generally opposed to social programs anyway.
Here's my thing, and as far as the way I understand the Libertarian Party, and correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe you don't share these beliefs, but the Libertarian Party is they're for immigration, they're for open borders kind of thing. Like for me, I'm not saying that we should actively go out and seek out, have like some, search and destroy unit that's out there trying to find illegal immigrants and send them back. But in my personal opinion, because we are already, and let's just be clear here, we are already paying to fly these illegal immigrants to other places in the country. We are already taking them from one location, like down in Texas, for example, and flying them to places like the Midwest or the Pacific Northwest, things like that. And we could be taking these people back to Mexico. For me, I think if you have broken the law to get here, you need to be deported. That's just my personal opinion. I think that giving driver's licenses to illegal immigrants legitimizes them, on top of which we already, there they are. They're right there. How about we send them back? Let's not make it any easier. Let's not legitimize them being here illegally, while at the same time. Go ahead.
I want to clarify here. I kind of misunderstood your question. I was kind of thinking, the DREAM Act and paying for illegal immigrants. Yeah, if you come into the country illegally, you shouldn't be getting a legal license in the country. Although in general, I believe it should be a lot easier to get into the country. So I would like to clarify on this particular issue. I was kind of talking towards the taxation issue a moment ago. I kind of apologize if I'm mixing my thing there. If you're just on the matter of the driver's license, you shouldn't be getting a legal license to be here if you're not here illegally. But I do believe it should be a lot easier to get here legally.
And I totally agree with that. I mean, right now it takes like 9 to 10 years for somebody to become a legal citizen in the United States. I think that needs some reform as far as making it a lot easier to get in. But at the same time, I think we need to be picky about who we allow in our country. In my personal opinion, I think that, and maybe you disagree, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. I think that we should be taking the best of the best, the cream of the crop from all the other people, all the other countries out there. Give people in our country to immigrate, to to create jobs, people that would be doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, things like that will help our economy, but instead, not take people who are going to basically just smooch off the system, people who are going to sponge off of everyone else's hard work. I think we need to be very selective in who we bring in, and I disagree with this whole give us your tired, your weak, all that. I think that we should be getting the best of the best, and that is what will help our economy. I don't think that it will hurt us in any way if we bring in people who are going to create jobs into this country. What do you think?
Well, I think if you're going to have someone who's going to mooch off the system, if you cut off the mooching to the system, they're not going to come here. If people realize they're not going to come here and get to live in public housing and blah 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 blah, free off the American taxpayers, they're not going to come here in the first place. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know if you were trying to insinuate this. You kind of insinuated that we should recruit people to come to our country. I don't think we should necessarily spend taxpayer dollars on that. But if someone wants to come into our country and they want to share in the freedoms of America, they should absolutely be allowed to do it. As long as they're not escaping the law in their own country.
Well, no, and let me clarify. As far as what I'm trying to say, I'm not saying we go out and actually try to recruit people from other countries, but let's be selective in who we allow in. If people that are going through the process to come into our country, and they come to us. I mean, we're not hunting them down trying to say, hey, join us. They're coming to us. So let's find out of that who's actually going to benefit us and who's just going to sponge off the system. Now, as far as what you're talking about, as far as reform of the actual system, making it less of a system where they will be inclined to be part of the welfare state, things like that. If we get rid of the welfare state, then those people won't come. Yes, and I agree. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think that the main problem, though, is that we can't have both open borders and a welfare state. A country that has open borders and a welfare state cannot exist. They simply will not exist. After a period of time, we're going to run into the same problems that we're having now, where we got more people in the cart than are pulling the cart of the economy.
Mm-hmm. So I want to get into an idea here that you're kind of circling around, and I don't know if you're intentionally circling around it, but it kind of sounds like I agree with it. You can't have open borders and a welfare state. I'm almost hearing the idea. Well, we can't have open borders and a welfare state, so we have to give up the idea of open borders. To me, that kind of strikes that statement. I don't know if you're getting at it or not, but that kind of strikes me as a defeatist attitude. Why can't we give up the welfare state? It doesn't work. The logic demonstrates it. The facts demonstrate it. Look at places like Detroit. It's been run into the ground by all the policies that were meant to help it. If we concede the point before the battle begins, of course we're going to lose. Maybe that's a discussion whose time has come.
Well, I'd be happy to have this discussion with you, and for me, I'm not a fan of open borders. That's really one thing that that I really disagree with the Libertarian Party on. And for me, I consider myself a conservative libertarian, fiscally conservative, socially liberal, more of a classic liberal. But I believe with Ben Franklin, he said a country that cannot secure its own borders can't secure its own destiny. And I think that we should actually not have open borders. I think it's not a good policy. I think it's dangerous to national security. On top of which, we currently do have a welfare state. Now, if you want to talk about my disagreement with the welfare state, yes, I absolutely fundamentally disagree with the welfare state, and I think we should continue to fight that battle. But we haven't won it, and in fact, we're seeing it expand every year. And in order to fight that, as well as fight the people that are coming in and basically joining that system, coming in for the purpose of becoming part of the welfare state, then let's be a little bit more selective in who we allow in our country. Let's deport people that are here illegally and make it easier for the people that we want in our country, like people that are going to create jobs, entrepreneurs, doctors, lawyers, school teachers, things like that. People that will benefit society, that have a plan other than just coming here to mooch off of the welfare state. I mean, I think that is a simple answer to lessening our cost in the welfare state. But obviously, we have to continue fighting against it. I'm not a fan of either of those things, but I'm not a fan of open borders. That's just me personally. What do you think?
Well, like you said, you can't have open borders and a welfare state. Maybe I should kind of elucidate the libertarian position on the open borders, and the question is what are your what are your objections to open borders to extent? I talk about this a little bit in my book, briefly, but the big objections to open borders. You've got the security risk. You can't have terrorists coming into our country. You can't have murderers escaping from other countries and coming into the United States and trying to escape the law in our country and then murdering people here. So you definitely need to keep those people out. While you've got the welfare state going and you're paying people taxpayer dollars, to mooch off of other people, you can't have people coming to our country that are going to get into that system and just start mooching off the people who live here. But what I hear a lot is the idea that the foreigners are stealing our jobs from us. So what are your ideas on that, and do you have any other objections?
Well, as far as stealing our jobs, I don't necessarily think that is that big of an issue as far as stealing our jobs. Like a lot of these people, especially the illegal immigrants, they're taking jobs that a lot of people don't want. In some cases, they're working under the table in like really harsh conditions, things like that. So I'm not necessarily so much worried about them taking our jobs. I'm worried about them taking our money out of taxpayers' pockets to pay for the welfare system, to pay for their medical care, to pay for things like driver's license for illegal immigrant programs, things along those lines. That's what I'm concerned about. As far as the jobs, I really don't care so much, because the people that are here legally going through the process and becoming immigrants that way, they may be taking jobs that other people want, but they're a benefit to society. Now they're American citizens, so that they're being a productive member of society, unlike somebody who comes here just to mooch off the system.
So yeah, it's so the idea that a lot of people are afraid that immigrants are taking our jobs. From my studies in economics, that's not the case. What happens is an American loses their job and then they get another job somewhere else, and it lowers the cost of living. So that American ends up having actually more spending money than before. And if you analyze economics, okay, let's cut off our borders and not do trade with other people. Let's cut off our borders and not do trade with other countries. So you say, okay, these countries aren't exploiting us, we're not exploiting them, they're not stealing our jobs, blah, blah, blah. Well, apply that principle, again, logically on the state level. Let's keep Washington from doing business with Oregon. Does that make sense? Would that help, local businesses? Let's do it again on the city level, where you can't trade across city lines. Would that do any business if Seattle can't do business with Tacoma? And, do it on the localist level. Okay, in your own house. You can't do business with people from other houses because they're stealing your jobs. And you'd have a lot more busy work. You'd have a lot more work to do, but you'd be less productive because it cuts into the specialization of labor, where we let people do what they do best. So that's a brief rundown. I don't want to go too long into it because you haven't expressed that idea you actually hold. But for any of your listeners who are actually concerned about that, that's a really brief rundown on the libertarian take on that. I absolutely am opposed to taking I'm opposed to taking American tax dollars from one group of people and giving them to other Americans. I'm doubly opposed to taking tax dollars from Americans and giving them to people who don't even aren't even members of our society. I don't have any hard feeling against people who live in other countries, but let's not hurt American citizens for the benefit of other people in other countries. I mean, we wouldn't raid Canada and steal a bunch of their money to pay for American homeless people. Let's not steal from American people and give it to homeless people in Mexico.
And I agree with you on that. And as far as not trading across borders, that's not something that I think that we should do. I'm a big fan of the free market. I think that we need to be a lot more competitive on the global scale. So I don't think you and I are too far off on this. But let's move on. I got a couple other questions here that I want to get to. We got to cut to a quick commercial break. Tim, are you okay with sticking around with us for a little bit longer?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. We'll be right back after this. Don't go anywhere, guys.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/onthemoveshow. We appreciate your support. Hi, Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
And we're back. I appreciate you guys sticking with us. So when we last left, we were talking with Libertarian Party candidate Tim Turner. We were talking the issues. And if you want to join the conversation today, the number to the show is 619-924-0986. Again, that's 619-924-0986. I have Tim on the line here, and I just want to make sure that that our listeners know about your book, Tim. We have it on our store, OnTheMoveShow.com, in the shop section, the third link down, and you can find it in our books area on there. I know that was a lot of details, but what's your book's name again, and what's some of the information it has in it again, Tim?
Well, the book's called The Profit Bargaining Ratio Theory. It's kind of a scary long title, but it shouldn't. I hope it's not that hard to read. It's really designed for the average person, the average politically minded person who wants to get in and understand the economy and how it actually works. And the book is really centered on this principle of the profit ratio between two people. When you trade, profit is created. That profit is shared between us, and there's a ratio that it's shared between. It could be a 60-40 ratio. It could be an 80-20 ratio. There's some ratio, and that ratio is socially governed. What happens when the government reaches in to change that ratio of trade, what it does, that ratio always comes back to its natural social balance point. The government can't change it. But what happens is the economy becomes less productive, and that skews that ratio in favor of the people who already have economic leverage. If you know the phrase, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, well, it's actually many of our attempts to help the poor which are causing that to happen. I mean, even Karl Marx I have this quote in my book, and I'm going to mess it up a little bit here because it's kind of convoluted, but here's Marx's quote: "If the advancement of legislation, the protection of the working man, both in mind and body, has become inevitable, on the other hand, it has accelerated the concentration of capital into the hands of a few." I mean, even Marx noticed this principle, that a lot of our laws that we have to help people out and to trade between two people, saying, okay, well, you have to make at least this much money with the minimum wage, or, we have to give you these benefits, or you have to have these working conditions. A lot of those laws have actually made things worse for the average working man and skewed the balance of the bargaining power in favor of the people who are rich.
Yes, sir. So as far as your campaign and things like that, I want to kind of bring us back to you and your campaign as well. And first of all, I'm curious. Can you give us a little bit of background on you and some experiences that you have that you think make you uniquely qualified for this position?
So I'm not sure where. I'm a United States Navy vet. I served in the United States Navy for 4 years. I was in the nuclear program on a submarine, the USS San Francisco. It's kind of an interesting submarine. We crashed into an underwater mountain, so we're kind of famous. That was January 8th, 2005. So I'm a Navy vet. I also taught school up for 7 months. I took over a class for another teacher, and so I taught game design. So I taught programming. I taught math in public school. So I've seen the public school system from the inside. And I've actually served the public as a public servant. And my opponent, she says that she's a public servant, and she's done that by being in high office and by being in charge in a lot of for nonprofit organizations, which isn't necessarily the same thing as public service. I've done a lot of study on economics. My book establishes a rational, logical case. The government's job is not to tell you how to live your life. The government's job is to protect your rights and to keep other people from telling you how your life should be lived. And whenever we get away from that, when we start telling people this is best for you, whatever that is, it doesn't matter what it is, but when government starts telling you what's best for you, that's always detrimental to the people involved and also to society as a whole. I mean, you can't neglect the people in society and expect society to flourish. You can't sacrifice the people in society and benefit society from that.
Okay, so I have to agree with you on that a lot. So as far as what got you into politics and what got you motivated, one thing I actually do know from listening to your appearance on the Johnny Rocket podcast, I understand that you used to be a Republican, and at some point you actually switched to the Libertarian Party and got involved in that. What brought you into politics, and what made you make that switch?
Well, I've been interested in politics since high school. I've always been interested in politics. I'm a software engineer. I like complex systems. I like to see how all the little parts work. So the concept of government has fascinated me for a long time. I worked for Don Benton as a session aide back in 2001 or so, and then I left off politics. 9/11 happened. I got involved in to say this because this is really weird. I'm looking at a smart car, and this very large man has just gotten out of the smart car right in front of me. It's just this sight picture. Anyway, so 9/11 happened, and I signed up for the Navy because I wanted to defend my country. I wanted to, my father was in the Navy, my grandfather was in the Navy, my stepbrother was in the Navy, my uncle. I wanted to carry on the family tradition. I wanted to serve my country, so I signed up. And when I got to the Navy, I thought, well, this is great. The Navy, the military tends to be a right-wing, organization. It tends to lean to the right. I was starting to come around to the libertarian perspective then. I had questions on some of the issues. But when I went to the Navy, I thought this is going to be great. It's a right-wing bureaucracy, so everything's going to be wonderful. And I got into it, and I started to see problem after problem in the Navy. People chewed up and abused by the system. Where the blame is always pushed on the guy, and it's largely a blame game. It's who can you point the finger at? And I just saw this enormous breakdown in the system, and I realized, the problem isn't who controls society. The problem isn't that the left controls society. The problem isn't the right controls society. The problem is that the control of society exists and that people are using it for their personal agenda. That's the problem, and if you want to attack that problem, you have to get that kind of power. You have to get rid of it. You have to get rid of the power to control other people's lives. And that's really where I made my major transition to the Libertarian Party. And for a long time, I've been a libertarian-leaning Republican, where it's like, okay, well, who's going to vote for more economic freedom? Who's really going to, that's my big issue is economic freedom, because that relates to everything else. I mean, that's how you live your life. That's how you fund your life. That's how you choose your lifestyle, is where you work and how you work, and what kind of things that you're allowed to do. That's all economics. And so that is an immensely important issue for me. And so for a long time, I was a libertarian-leaning Republican voting for Republicans. But, even a lot of Republicans don't understand the economy. A lot of Republicans vote for, big corporate bailouts, vote for subsidies for corporations if it's in their home district. And there's a lot of wasteful spending that even the Republicans support. And, the Republicans on social issues, I don't agree with a lot of things. I've never used narcotics in my life. I don't even drink alcohol. I don't drink coffee. I drink sodas every once in a while for a little caffeine pep. But I don't even drink coffee. I don't like aspirin. I don't like mind-altering chemicals at all. But I'm not going to barge into your house and shoot you over it. Which is really, when you say something is illegal, you're not saying that I approve of this or disapprove of this. What you're saying is I approve of shooting people over this. I approve of taking people away from their families over this. While I don't agree with the use of marijuana, it shouldn't be illegal. I'm not going to barge into someone's house and stop them from doing it with violence, and I'm not going to pay some police officer who's trying to serve his community. I'm not going to pay him and force him to go barge into someone else's house and do that.
I totally agree. I think that's one thing, because it's so easy just to say, there should be some kind of law against that. But I think that's one part that people don't seem to understand, for the most part, is that when you pass a law, you're basically saying that you're willing to shoot somebody over this. If everything comes to blows, that person should die if they don't follow this law. And they fight the law, basically. So when people say, there should be some kind of law, they really need to ask, is it worth killing somebody over that? And I definitely agree. I like your take on that. Actually, I have a little game that I kind of want to play here, because I know, based on some of the stuff that you were talking about, you're small government, and you're against like the government overreach, and I'm kind of curious what your take on this. I'd like to play a game called Would You Abolish It? You willing to play with me here, Tim?
Okay.
Okay, all right. I've never done this before, so basically I'm going to ask.
I'm a guinea pig then.
What was that?
I'm a guinea pig then.
Yeah, you're my guinea pig. So the very first thing here, I'm going to start naming off departments of the government, and I'm just curious if you would keep it or if you would abolish it. So I'm going to name it off, and you just say keep it or abolish it. All right?
Okay. No, I'm not allowed to put any qualifiers on this whatsoever.
Yeah, we'll allow you to qualify it. That's fine. No problem. All right. So Department of Education.
That should be abolished, and the power should be transferred back to the states.
Okay. Food and Drug Administration.
To the parents themselves. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. Yeah. Food and Drug Administration.
Food and Drug Administration. It should be abolished. It doesn't. A lot of people are afraid that people are going to buy quack sales. Just because the government stamps a label on it doesn't mean it's safe to use. I mean, look at what they did with the BP oil spill. That was regulated. We had regulations protecting us from that. And it's only a matter of time before we have some major cure which turns out to kill people, and it got past FDA regulations. We're giving a rubber stamp of there are plenty of drugs. I mean, there are companies that have to pay millions and millions and millions of dollars in order to get something qualified by the FDA. So it's not like the FDA is out here saving lives. They're raising the cost of medicines, and they're banning medicines for years until they get through approval, which would be saving lives now. So it could sound cruel that we're not going to be saving people's lives. We're harming more people with the FDA than we're saving. It should be abolished.
All right. The Department of Justice.
Department of Justice. Now I'm going to confess that I don't necessarily know everything that the Justice Department does, but we need a court system. The fundamental functions of government are the court system, the police system, and the military system. Those are the core fundamental principles of government. So you absolutely need a court system. I know it's become very politicized of late of who we're going to prosecute and who we're not going to prosecute, which is not what the Department of Justice should be used for.
Okay, so let's go ahead and say keep it until we find out for sure. So, environmental protection.
There might be things that it does that I would abolish it, but you do need to have a court system, in order to try people, run juries, all that. And I have to confess, I'm not as familiar with the interior structure of the justice system and everything which it controls.
Yeah. Believe me, I understand. I'm not expecting you to be an expert on all these. So, the next one, Environmental Protection Agency.
The Environmental Protection Agency, that's a tough one, because you can't allow people just to dump toxic waste in other people's backyards. But I don't think that there's any real serious rational person that doesn't realize the EPA has been used for a political agenda. It's been used to shut down businesses. It's been used to say no, you can't live your life that way. You can't use your property for you build on your own property. It's been used for political purposes. We say, oh, don't hurt the turtles, don't hurt the owls, don't hurt the spotted tree lizards, and it's not about saving some species. It's about we just don't want people building houses. It's been used for that purpose. It's a hideous abuse of power. You can't have corporations dumping toxic waste into people's backyards. You do have to protect the air. So in theory, the EPA has a strong justification for its existence. I don't know that it's constitutional, which is a strong disqualifier right there. But I would have to say that the abuses under the EPA, those are bordering on, well, we should abolish it and transfer any true function it has to the Justice Department and say, okay, if you're dumping toxic waste into the environment, you should be tried under the Justice Department, not under the EPA. Because the abuse of it, is horrible.
Yeah, for me, I think that we could definitely abolish the EPA, lay that kind of jurisdiction over to the local and state governments. There's already laws in the books for doing that, and these are regulations put in forth by the EPA. They're not laws. So states already have laws against illegal dumping and things like that. If you violate the law, you go to jail. I don't think there's any need to over-regulate on a national scale. Let's let the states decide what's illegal and what's not illegal. But anyway, moving forward here, I got a few more here. I want to get through these really quickly. The Internal Revenue Service.
Oh wow, that's a big one. What you do need to fund the government that exists. As a small government, so you have to have some sort of system for managing that. As a small government kind of a guy. I mean, I think we collect too many taxes, and we definitely politicize it too much, and we have brackets for special people, and we have special loopholes for special people, and we give way too many benefits to special people for having powerful lobbyists, and we penalize people with our tax system. That's all screwed up. There's all kinds of wrong. I'm a big fan of the idea of let's just have a postcard for your tax return. You say your first $20,000 is tax-free, and then just the difference between your net worth this year and next year, and you pay a set percentage on that. Put it on a postcard, mail it in, save yourself the money from going to TurboTax, and that should be save yourself the time of filling everything out. And just you put it on a small sheet that anyone can fill out in 15 minutes. Big fan of that. The IRS with Lois Lerner, I mean, sure, innocent until proven guilty, preponderance of evidence, but we all know that Lois Lerner deleted her emails, that she intentionally did stuff that she knew was criminal, that she knew was wrong. She spied on, or she was preying on Americans because of their political beliefs, and she deleted the evidence. It's the 18 minutes of Watergate tape. We know that's what's going to happen. We until we have solid evidence, we can't drag her into jail. You can't drag people into jail on circumstantial evidence. So absolutely she shouldn't go to jail. Absolutely she should be fired from her job and banned from public office. That's a huge black mark on the IRS. IRS in general, I'm gonna lay this idea on you. What if we didn't have taxes?
Honestly,
kind of a crazy idea.
Honestly,
but,
I'm big the use tax, like taxing everybody, let's say 10% on everything that they buy, rather than, but also outlawing any kind of income tax, because my personal opinion, I think we should abolish the IRS. I think that we should simply go to a use tax, make everything fair across the board. Even billionaires spend money, so everybody would be paying their fair share. There no exemptions whatsoever. Like right now, GE made over billions of dollars last year, but they got all these tax breaks. They didn't pay a single dollar in taxes. So that to me is unfair. If we have everything just fair across the board, everybody pays their fair share. I have no problem with it, and I don't think that we need to have an IRS there in the first place.
I want to make a couple of comments on the use tax. I kind of support the idea, but there are a couple of warnings that it should come with. The use tax is fair because we don't have special exemptions for special people. But originally the income tax wasn't really that big either, and politicians added those in over time. And over time, the use tax will do the same thing. They'll put a higher tax on Cadillacs than they do on Volkswagens. They'll put a higher tax on Ferraris than they do on Cadillacs, and ultimately we will get the same tax brackets back. The other thing is. That's the main point. I mean, so are we really making things more fair? Well, the other thing is, okay, we've seen this time and time again. I'm not stupid. We've seen this time and time again. You have fiscal conservatives. They come up with a plan. They make agreement with the left wing, saying, hey, let's make a compromise on this. So the fiscal conservatives are always the ones that say, okay, we'll go first, we'll take the sacrifice first, and you give us, yours compromise later on. And that compromise is never delivered on. We've seen that time and time again, where politicians have trusted the other side. Okay, we're going to compromise. We'll take a hit. You take a hit, or we'll take a punishment for we'll postpone our agenda for a while. You postpone your agenda for a while, but we'll go first. And we've done that, and time again we've seen that one side will give up there and the other side won't. And what's going to happen, I would just about bet money on it. I would certainly vote against it. What's going to happen if we approve a use tax, we're going to keep the income tax, and we'll have a use tax at the same time, and they'll get us with both taxes at once. I am absolutely opposed to that. I would totally destroy the use tax over that issue alone. I think it's not a bad idea, but you cannot have an income tax and a use tax at the same time. That is the worst possible compromise you could have. I would absolutely trounce that. I would absolutely speak against it. I would absolutely vote against it. You cannot do both taxes.
Exactly. And like for me, the only way that I would support a use tax is making it, impossible for them to have to ever come back with an income tax, we'd have to abolish the IRS. We'd have to get rid of the income tax and make it impossible for them to start it up again and make it locked in at a certain, everything has to be the same all around instead of creating these special exemptions or, creating, certain increased taxes for certain things. Everything would have to be flat all the way across the board. That's the only way I would support it. But anyway, we're running out of time here. I gotta ask you, Tim, where can my listeners go to get more information about how to help your campaign, and what specifically would you like them to do?
They can go to www.electtimturner.com. That's www.electtimturner.com. They can volunteer for my campaign if they're in the 48th district. They can donate to my campaign if they want to help free market principles in a blue district in just outside of Seattle, the Redmond, Bellevue, Kirkland area. That's kind of an important thing at this stage of the campaign is funding. I won't take donations from any organization. I won't even take a donation from a small business. I'll only take donations from private individuals. And I'm a little bit leery of people who are spending $1,000 on a political donation for one candidate. I don't want to be. I support people earning their living. I absolutely support people getting as rich as they possibly can, fairly and justly. But they shouldn't have an unequal say in government. So I'm not a big fan of getting a huge $1,000 check from one particular person.
Mm-hmm. So one more time, give us that website one more time.
www.electtimturner.com.
All righty. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show, Tim. It was an absolute pleasure to talk with you. And you're welcome back on anytime, just so you know. So if you have anything you want to get out there, feel free to contact me again. I'll have you on.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thanks again. All right. So at this point, we're going to cut to a quick commercial break. And when we get back, we're going to enter into the next segment of the show we like to call the Mack Attack.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/onthemoveshow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within occupied territory on the far left coast. You're listening to On the Move with Mack Worley III.
And we're back. We are into the second hour of the show now, so I appreciate you all sticking with us. When we last left, we had Libertarian Party candidate Tim Turner on the line, and we were talking the issues. So anyway, at this point, we're going to go ahead and enter into the next segment of the show, and we like to call it the Mack Attack.
It's time for the Mack Attack!
All right, this is a segment of the show where I give you my take on outrageous events in the news. So buckle up. All right, if you want to join the conversation today, the telephone number to the show is 619-924-0986. Again, that's 619-924-0986. Or you can email the show at talk@onthemoveshow. So, all right, if you've been following the news headlines this week, I'm sure you guys know the situation in Iraq is out of control. ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, they're basically it's a militia group, a terror group that's it's going over and taking territory and basically overthrowing the government of Iraq that we've worked to actually put into place. So anyway, last week I played the statement that Obama gave on this, and I'm going to play it again just so we can get a little refresher of things that he said that they were going to do. So here he is.
Morning, everybody. I want to take some time to give you a quick update about the situation in Iraq. Yesterday I convened a meeting with my National Security Council to discuss the situation there, and this morning I received an update from my team. Over the last several days, we've seen significant gains made by ISIL, a terrorist organization that operates in both Iraq and in Syria. In the face of a terrorist offensive, Iraqi security forces have proven unable to defend a number of cities, which has allowed the terrorists to overrun a part of Iraq's territory. And this poses a danger to Iraq and its people, and given the nature of these terrorists, it could pose a threat eventually to American interests as well. Now, this threat is not brand new. Over the last year, we've been steadily ramping up our security assistance to the Iraqi government with increased training, equipping, and intelligence. Now, Iraq needs additional support to break the momentum of extremist groups and bolster the capabilities of Iraqi security forces. We will not be sending U.S. troops back into combat in Iraq, but I have asked my national security team to prepare a range of other options that could help support Iraq security forces, and I'll be reviewing those options in the days ahead. I do want to be clear, though. This is not solely or even primarily a military challenge. Over the past decade, American troops have made extraordinary sacrifices to give Iraqis an opportunity to claim their own future. Unfortunately, Iraqis' leaders have been unable to overcome too often the mistrust and sectarian differences that have long been simmering there. And that's created vulnerabilities within the Iraqi government as well as their security forces. So, any action that we may take to provide assistance to Iraqi security forces has to be joined by a serious and sincere effort by Iraq's leaders to set aside sectarian differences, to promote stability, and account for the legitimate interests of all of Iraq's communities, and to continue to build the capacity of an effective security force. We can't do it for them. And in the absence of this type of political effort, short-term military action, including any assistance we might provide, won't succeed. So this should be a wake-up call. Iraq's leaders have to demonstrate a willingness to make hard decisions and compromises on behalf of the Iraqi people in order to bring the country together. In that effort, they will have the support of the United States and our friends and our allies. Now, Iraq's neighbors also have some responsibilities to support this process. Nobody has an interest in seeing terrorists gain a foothold inside of Iraq, and nobody is going to benefit from seeing Iraq descend into chaos. So the United States will do our part, but understand that ultimately it's up to the Iraqis as a sovereign nation to solve their problems. Indeed, across the region, we have redoubled our efforts to help build more capable counterterrorism forces so that groups like ISIL can't establish safe haven. And we'll continue that effort through our support of the moderate opposition in Syria, our support for Iraq and its security forces, and our partnership with other countries across the region. We're also going to pursue intensive diplomacy throughout this period, both inside of Iraq and across the region, because there's never going to be stability in Iraq or the broader region unless there are political outcomes that allow people to resolve their differences peacefully without resorting to war or relying on the United States military. We'll be monitoring the situation in Iraq very carefully over the next several days. Our top priority will remain being vigilant against any threats to our personnel serving overseas. We will consult closely with Congress as we make determinations about appropriate action, and we'll continue to keep the American people fully informed as we make decisions about the way forward.
Okay, so last week he said that he's going to wait several days to make any kind of action. So it's been several days. It's been a week now. What have we done? Have we done anything? No, we haven't done anything so far. All we've done is talk about doing stuff, from what I can tell. You know, we're talking about sending 300 special ops troops, likely Green Berets, to Iraq in an advisory role to assist the Iraqi military. Okay, Well, correct me if I'm wrong. We just heard Obama say that we are not going to be sending U.S. troops back into combat in Iraq. So we're sending troops, but they're not going to go back into combat. They're going to be advisors. So how can we guarantee that these troops aren't going to end up in combat? He's sending them into a war zone. Let's just be clear about that. It is a war zone. And don't think that these terrorist organizations don't see it as an opportunity to attack more American troops. Not to mention now they have an incentive to capture American troops. This is all thanks to Obama negotiating with terrorists to release 5 top-level terror leaders for one American Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl, for example. And let's also not forget that it's entirely possible that Bergdahl abandoned his post and actively sought out the enemy to join them. That's possible. So we released 5 terrorist leaders who are going to go back fighting against us for one possible deserter / traitor. Does this sound smart to you guys? I can't begin to fathom this decision. I think it was the worst decision he could have made. But let's get back to these 300 troops, okay? Let's talk about the troops that they're sending to Iraq now. We obviously can't ensure that they're not going to be going into harm's way. We can't deny that we've given terrorists an incentive to capture Americans in order to get more terrorists in exchange from Guantanamo. So even if Obama could guarantee, which he can't, even if he could guarantee that these troops will never see combat, is this really the answer? I can't stand this type of warfare. This administration is only willing to commit to half measures. They don't want to do anything that's going to rock the boat. And let's be honest here, 300 troops is an insult. 300 troops, it's not even enough to hold one city, let alone an entire country. The lack of commitment I'm seeing here is astonishing. And the government of Iraq, and the rest of the world, they have to be scratching their heads saying, what the heck is going on with America? And then we have Secretary of State John Kerry. He's talking about how possibly we're going to look to Iran to helping us. Iran. Here he is. Here's a clip with him saying it.
We're open to discussions if there's something constructive that can be contributed by Iran, if Iran is prepared to do something that is going to respect the integrity and sovereignty of Iraq and the ability of the government to reform.
Can you see cooperating with Iran militarily?
At this moment, I think we need to go step by step and see what, in fact, might be a reality. But I wouldn't rule out anything that would be constructive to providing real stability, a respect for the Constitution, a respect for the election process, and a respect for the ability of the Iraqi people to form a government that represents all of the interests of Iraq.
All right, so this has to be a joke. Yeah, I'm just saying this. I feel like I'm being punked. Where's Ashton Kutcher? Because I feel like I'm being punked right now. Iran, they're thought to have supplied terrorists in both Iraq and Afghanistan with weapons to use against our military. And now we're talking about working with them? Is it just me, or is this beyond insane? Iran has an interest in gaining control in Iraq. Why in the world would we open the door for them to get involved, especially considering they consider us Big Satan? This country's leadership hates us and our ally, our closest ally, Israel. And let's not forget about their continued attempts to gain nuclear technology. That is a threat to us and our allies around the world. We don't need to be working with them on anything. Iran is a threat to us. We need to treat them like a threat. They are not our friends. They want to kill us. And President Obama, once again, is under the misconception that if we're friendly to our enemies, they will be our friends. This simply is just not the case, people. The only way to ensure peace is to be strong. And let's be real here. These people are looking at us as weak. The way I see it here, we only have, a couple of options. We can either, and in fact, I'm sure I'm going to get people that are going to disagree with me. So the phone lines are open, 619-924-0986. If you disagree, I'd like to hear what you have to say. But the way I see it, we either need to totally commit to ensuring the stability of this fledgling government that we created. I mean, we established this government in Iraq. So we need to either commit whatever resources and men necessary to eliminate the terrorist threat, and I'm talking total war here, all right, or we need to get out of the region. Get out of there and focus heavily on securing our own borders. I can't see any other reasonable answers to this problem. Half measures such as sending 300 troops, it's not going to gain anything. In fact, we stand to lose a lot here. We're showing our allies that we aren't prepared to commit militarily to Iraq or to the Middle East anymore. And we're also showing our enemies the same thing, which emboldens the terrorists. They think that they're winning. They think they've finally beaten back the American occupying force. They're using this propaganda to recruit, more extremist terrorists, and they're using the prisoner exchange that we did with Bo Bergdahl to show that America's bowing down to them. And we look like we're turning tail and running away. So ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you, the barbarians are at the gates. We are at a crossroads right now, and we need to make a decision. Do we fully support the Iraqi government that we helped create, the government that we established to fill this power vacuum that we are responsible for creating when we took Saddam out of power? Doing this will mean more American lives are going to be lost, of course. If we commit to Iraq and we start fighting this again, we send more troops on the ground, yes, more American lives will be lost. More blood and treasure will be lost in Iraq. But it will ensure that Iraq doesn't become a safe haven for terrorism. And it's also going to mean that, terrorist groups won't be able to plot against American interests from Iraq. So it's also going to mean that the region will be more stable and less of a threat. So the question is, do we do that, or do we pull out of the Middle East entirely? Do we cut our losses in the region? Do we, leave the stability up to Iraq, to the Iraqi people? Do we stand as a country, by this country, or do we just stand by and just let them fall into terrorist hands and become a safe haven for these terrorists? If we do this, we have to focus on border security, which would need to be heavily increased, which of course would be good for us here at home. But do we really trust our government to take our border security seriously? And is it even possible to fully secure our borders and every single threat that could possibly exist from coming through? My question to you all is with all the blood and treasure that we lost in Iraq, should we just cut our losses, or should we continue to make sure it doesn't become a safe haven for terrorists? I'd like to know what you have to think. So the phone lines are open. Again, 619-924-0986, or you can email the show at talk@onthemoveshow.com, and we'll read it live on the air. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say. Anyway, at this point, we're going to cut to a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/onthemoveshow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services, from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
And we're back. Okay, so when we last left, we were talking about the situation in Iraq. And, one thing I've found kind of interesting throughout the last few weeks here is, the Democrats, they are blaming everything, as usual, on Bush. Everything is Bush's fault. They've been blaming Bush for the economy for years. And as expected, they're now blaming Bush for everything that happened in Iraq. So, everything's now Bush's fault. no matter what happens, it's Bush's fault. So anyway, here's Nancy Pelosi, and she's talking about how everything that basically happened is a failure of policy from the Bush administration, and there's nothing that they can do about it because it's all Bush's fault. So anyway, I got the clip here. I'll let you guys listen to it for yourself. So here it is.
We have to go back to 2003. We'll go back to 2002. In the fall of 2002, when the Bush administration misrepresented the facts to the American people, took us into a war on a false premise that they knew not to be true, told the American people the war would pay for itself, it would be over soon, we'd be greeted by rose petals, that we had to go in there, according to Condoleezza Rice, because the smoking gun might be a nuclear plume. That's what they told the American people. Of course, it was not true, and they knew it not to be true. I said at the time, as a senior Democrat on intelligence, intelligence does not support the threat. You could not find in any of the intelligence that was available, and that they had to show us everything, any sign of that threat. So we go down a path, diverting our attention from Afghanistan, where we should have just finished the job in 2002, 2003. Instead, we take up another war, and here we are. War begets war. It's just not a good idea. And what's next? That's what the American people would want to know. What's next? Was it Hannah Arendt who said that people think that one more act of violence is going to end violence, but it's like a flywheel. One act of violence provokes another act of violence, and here we are.
I can't take this woman. The ridiculousness of her, first of all, it doesn't justify us pulling up stakes as quickly as we are right now to basically just, get out of Iraq as quickly as possible. Forget the consequences. We're just getting out. We need to get out as quickly as possible. Like I said before, I'm not a fan of the Iraq war to begin with. I don't think that we should have been there. But once we were there, people stood up alongside us, and they put their lives on the line. And let me just point out that Nancy Pelosi, not so much the most trustworthy person. She operates underneath the same kind of crap that Bush did, false information, fog of war kind of stuff. And again, let's just remember, she said this.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it away from the fog of the controversy.
So, her hands are not clean in this to begin with. She's talking about Obamacare. We have to pass a law in order to find out what's in it. So, she has the same kind of misrepresentation and that the Bush administration did as well. So, yes, it's two different scenarios. I understand that. But this woman is not to be trusted to begin with. And I won't be lectured from her about the how hard war is and how bad war is and how war begets war. I'm not going to hear it from her. And if everything is Bush's fault, like they'd like us to believe, right? Everything is Bush's fault. We can't blame anything on this administration. Not the economy, not the failure of Obamacare's launch, not Operation Fast and Furious, not Benghazi, definitely not Benghazi, not the IRS targeting the Tea Party, and certainly not Iraq. Bush must have been the most influential president in the history of our republic, because that's the only reason I could think of that we can't undo any of the stuff he did, right? I mean, we are halfway through Obama's second term, and we still can't fix what that darn Bush did. This administration is incapable of taking responsibility for anything. And let me tell you a little joke here, all right? And I'm going to relate it back to what's going on here, all right? A Republican governor named Jeff, all right, this is all fictional, by the way, was leaving office. He served his 2 terms, and he decided he was done with the political limelight. He's ready to retire and just stay out of politics, okay? So his replacement, Mark, he's a Republican, and Jeff endorsed Mark during the election process, and now Mark is all set to take over. So Jeff invited Mark out for lunch one day, and it was the day before Jeff was about to take office. Leave office, and Mark was about to take over. And Jeff told Mark, I've written 2 letters for you. Don't open these letters unless you run into a situation that you can't resolve. You can't get out of it, and you don't know what to do. So when that day comes, I want you to open up the first letter and follow its instructions. if you run into another situation that you can't resolve, I want you to open up the second letter and do the very same thing. So Mark agreed, and Mark thanked Jeff. And, after a few months in office as governor, Mark ran into some problems, and he didn't know how to get out of the situation. So he opened up the first letter, and it said, blame everything on me. And Mark did exactly what the letter said. He blamed it all on the former governor and said, hey, none of these are my problems. This is all stuff created from him, and I'm just trying to fix it. And it worked. He couldn't believe how well it worked. He was like, this is amazing. These letters saved my office here. I would have gotten voted out for sure. So, he did this, and then he ended up getting reelected. So a few months later into his next term, Mark ran into another situation that he couldn't find an answer for. And he knew that he had that second letter. He was so excited. He quickly ran over to the desk where he kept the second letter, hoping that he'd find the answers to his problems, just like he did with the first letter. So Mark opened up the second letter, and it read, start writing 2 letters. And, let's get back to Obama here. You see, at some point, the last guy, blaming the last guy, it eventually stops working. When will Obama have to use the second letter? When will he be called out for his failed policies and his lack of leadership? I think it's time. But again, we don't have the Congress that has a spine or the backbone to actually file any kind of articles of impeachment. It's not going to happen, and definitely not at least until after November, after the election's over. But anyway, more news throughout this week here. We found out that they finally got one of the Benghazi terrorists. Woo! We got him. All right. Well, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't celebrate. Ahmed Abu Khattala, he wasn't even hiding. So, I'm not going to give Obama any credit here. It took years to catch a man, and this man wasn't even hiding. On top of that, he's admitted to being part of the Benghazi terror attack. So it's not even like he was a suspect of it. We knew he did it. And, last week I played a clip for you, and I just want to play the first part of it again here. And it's Trey Gowdy, and he's talking about, what happened in Benghazi, and he's also talking about what President Obama said that he was going to do. So, I have Trey Gowdy's response here to that, and I'm going to play it for the first few minutes of it.
Thank you, Jimmy. We will not waver in our commitment to see that justice is done for this terrible act in Benghazi. And make no mistake, justice will be done. That was the President of the United States over a year ago.
All right, so he said he was going to bring these people to justice. So now we're bringing Ahmed Abu Khattala to justice, right? We finally got him. So my question is, what's going to happen to this guy? Is he going to go to prison? Are we going to put him to death? Are we going to kill this guy? Are we going to stick him in Guantanamo Bay? Well, if we do that, let's talk about what just happened. We just released 5 terrorist leaders. We just let them go in Guantanamo Bay. What's going to happen to this guy? Are we just going to end up letting him go too? I mean, Obama is trying to close down Guantanamo. Are we going to put him in our prison system? Do you think he's going to survive in there? Is that fair to put him in our prison system with Americans who probably will kill him for attacking America? For me, it leaves this big question. So what are we going to do with him? Because, are we going to turn him into a martyr by killing him? Are we going to put him in our prison system where he's probably going to die anyway? Are we going to put him in Guantanamo where our president is just going to release him anyway? What kind of justice are we going to have in this? And it's clear to me that the Obama administration, they don't care about justice. They don't care about trying to find justice for the victims in Benghazi. I mean, let's just look at the former spokesperson to the White House, and he's on Fox, and he's like, dude, it was like 2 years ago.
People in America would probably be talking about the Americans, including the U.S. ambassador who was killed. Of the things that were happening around the globe, that probably took precedent. Don't you agree?
The ambassador's death, the 3 others who were killed that day, that is a tragedy. Okay. And what we should be worried about is making sure that never happens again. Instead, this ridiculous political game about talking points.
It's ridiculous. Don't you think it's ridiculous? Listen, you're out of government.
Creating
Just
a cover-up.
Try to be straight here.
Isn't
it ridiculous that this particular email did not get released originally?
Yes. I wish that email had been released.
Why did it take a FOIA and a judge to get this Ben Rhodes email?
I don't know. I bet every single person at White House wished that email had been released earlier. I do too, because it tells us nothing new. It tells us that what we said privately was what we said publicly, because that's what we thought had occurred. And Ben's email clearly references protests, plural, because there were countless across the world.
But if you're a communications expert, if you're prepping an official for a Sunday show, you're probably going to prep on the biggest question of the Sunday show, which probably, maybe, would have been the U.S. ambassador and 3 others who died.
That's fair. And I was among the people who prepped the Susan Rice. And we talked about, the protests were front and center in Ben's email because there was still concern about additional violence in the region.
Let's go to the talking points.
The day of Ben's email, just I want to flag, was Friday, which is Friday prayers in a number of countries like Pakistan, and we were extremely worried.
The 14th is the day you're talking about.
Yeah.
According to the emails and the timeline, the CIA circulates new talking points after they've removed a mention of Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
And then at 6:21, the White House, me, add a line about the administration warning of September 10th of social media reports calling for demonstrations. True?
I believe so.
Did you also change attacks to demonstrations in the talking points?
Maybe. I don't really remember.
You don't remember?
Dude, this was like 2 years ago. We're still talking about the most mundane process
that everybody is talking about.
We're talking about the process of editing talking points. That's what bureaucrats do all day long. Your producers edit scripts multiple times.
Attacks to demonstrations.
Yeah.
Did you do that?
No. What is the question? Did I edit
the CIA talking points? It was edited from attacks to demonstrations.
No, Michael Morales testified about what he changed and what was changed in those emails and the whole process of that.
But the talking points went through the public affairs people.
Yeah,
which is kind of unique.
These are the most well understood and discussed talking points in the history of.
All right, so look, I mean, we can see that they don't care, dude. It was 2 years ago. Get over it. Come on. I mean, who cares about the talking points? Well, it kind of matters. It does kind of matter because this was basically created out of nowhere. They created a situation here where now we're blaming these spontaneous protests, and I'm using air quotes here, and they're blaming it on a video? First of all, who was just walking around with RPGs and automatic weapons, on them and spontaneously getting offended and then going and attacking an embassy? But more importantly, let's just point out that this administration, they say that they could not have gotten there in time. Well, we know that that's wrong because how could they have known when it was going to end? How could they have known when the attack was going to end? On top of which, we had Americans standing by that never got the order to come help. This administration doesn't care. They do not care. And that's exactly why it took them forever to find one person responsible for the Benghazi attack. Will we find the rest? I don't know. But even if we do, what's to say that they're not just going to let them go again? I mean, they let 5 top-level terrorists go who are responsible for killing Americans. And now these 5 terrorists are going to go out and kill more Americans when they join the fight. Not to mention all the propaganda, that it created for these terrorist organizations, and now they're going to be recruiting like crazy. I want these terrorists to be caught. But I don't think that anything's going to happen that's going to bring anybody to justice, not with this administration. I mean, we just let 5 dangerous terrorists go. According to a 2008 Pentagon dossier, these people are very likely to go back and start fighting again against us in our interest. So what are we going to do with Ahmed Abu Khattala? That's the guy we caught. And are we going to catch any more? Are we going to bring anybody to really bring them to justice? Or are we just going to, talk about it? Anyway, we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/onthemoveshow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
I challenge you to a duel. Did you hear that? Sounds like it's time for a challenge. Listener challenge. Listener challenge. Listener challenge. Listener challenge.
All right, this is the point of the show where I challenge you, our listeners, to a challenge. So, all right, your mission this week, if you choose to accept it, is to help spread the word about our show. As I say every week, this is your show, and it can't function without you. And we're doing another listener surge. And with that said, I'm recruiting all of you to the street team if you're willing to join. We want to put together a team of people to help spread the word about the show. So the question is, how can you help? Specifically, how can you help? What can you do? And I'm glad that you asked. First, you can share the post from facebook.com/onthemoveshow to your Facebook page. You can do it to all of your Facebook groups and your Twitter and other social media sites. There's a lot of different things that we post that you could help spread the word about. You can talk to your friends and your family about the show and help get them involved as well. You can also come up with new and creative ways to help spread the word about the show. And lastly, you can contact us at Talk@OnTheMoveShow. And if you're interested, we'll send you business cards for the show, and you can pass them out to people. So don't forget, you can also follow us on Twitter at OnTheMoveShow and like us on Facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow. And that is this week's challenge. So with that said, stand up, speak out, and get on the move. And if you guys have anything, we got a few minutes left in the show. If you have anything on your mind, feel free to call in 619-924-0986. Again, that's 619-924-0986. And I realized last week that we never did the Weekly Defender. Last week we ran out of time, and I just totally forgot to do it. So we're going to go ahead and move into the next segment of the show called the Weekly Defender.
And now it's time for the Weekly Defender. You have the right to defend your life, the right to defend your family, and the right to defend your freedom.
And this is a segment of the show where I report about armed citizens in the news who have used their firearms to defend their family, their property, or their lives. So our first Weekly Defender we found on KPTV News, and this one is actually very crazy to me. You know, a female cougar, and I'm not talking about an older woman. I'm talking about a mountain lion, attempted to follow a 14-year-old boy into a basement door of his home in Twisp, Washington. This is very, close to me. It's in Washington State, so I figured this would be something important to cover. The boy's 11-year-old sister shot and killed the animal before it could become a threat. The cougar is described as being nearly 40 pounds underweight, which could explain its desperation in blatantly approaching people. It was reported that the girl has a permit to hunt cougars and that there was no violation of law here in order for her to defend her brother. So I am really, really just blown away that this little girl was able to defend her brother, and she was able to stop this mountain lion from attacking before it killed. I mean, this is amazing. This right here is why we have the right to bear arms, especially defending yourself, self-defense, being able to like we talked about in great detail, overthrow a tyrannical government. These kind of things are important, and it's very, very possible that mountain lion could have eaten this 14-year-old boy and possibly killed the sister as well. So, I really would love to shake this little girl's hand. That was amazing. Our next Weekly Defender we found on KGW News in Portland, Oregon. Police identified the suspect who shot 3 people before getting shot by a security guard at the Mystics Gentlemen Club in Portland this was, this is back a few months ago. Anyway, police identified the suspect owners of the strip club said that the shooter was denied entry because of belligerent behavior and racist comments. He then returned a half an hour later, armed with a gun and wearing a scary Halloween mask. The shooter came in and just started shooting without any kind of warning, a victim told KGW News. He was playing video poker when he was shot in the foot. That's the victim that said that. A security guard returned fire and hit the subject, and he was not arrested. He was actually cooperating with the police. So the Portland area is safe, according to the police. However, gun violence is pervasive, as we've seen elsewhere, and it's really easy for someone with a gun to hurt a lot of people, said Sergeant Greg Stewart with the Portland Police Bureau. So I'm just curious, did anybody hear about this where an armed citizen stopped somebody from shooting up a place? It gets virtually no attention in the mainstream media. Nobody is talking about this. Why don't we hear about stuff like this? This is like the Clackamas Town shooting that happened not too far from here. There was this guy, he was shooting up a mall, and he was stopped by a concealed carry permit holder. The guy saw the gun, pointed the gun at the suspect, did not shoot, but the suspect ran away and eventually shot himself. And he prevented more loss of life. I think this is amazing when this kind of stuff happens, but we don't hear about it on the news. It doesn't get covered, or if it does get covered, they don't mention the fact that it was stopped by an armed citizen. You have a right to defend your life, you have a right to defend your family, and you have a right to defend your freedom. We at On the Move, we support your rights. And if you have a story about how you lawfully defended yourself, or you'd like to comment on one of these stories, we'd love to hear from you. Give us a call. The number to the show is 619-924-0986, or you can email the show at talk@onthemoveshow.com. So, in the last few minutes of the show here, I'd really like to talk about what's going on with the IRS scandal and Lois Lerner. Lois Lerner, they've subpoenaed the emails, and these emails have disappeared. All the conversations back and forth about what was going on, how the Tea Party was being targeted, they want these emails. And it makes sense. I mean, we need to see what happened. So the emails, they just disappeared. And, emails can't just disappear. If she, deleted her computer or something, deleted the emails on her computer, they're on the database. So they're out there forever. Well, according to the IRS, they delete their database every 6 months. How convenient. First of all, they're not supposed to do that, but they did. So now it's not on the database, and we find out that Lois Lerner's computer crashed. Oh, it just crashed. And then, on top of that, they recycled the hard drive. So it's out there somewhere in the world. Someone else is using it. It's been recycled, or maybe it's, for scrap metal or something, but it's no longer there either. And how convenient. It seems like this is a very blatant cover-up. The computer crashed. Okay, we got rid of that, and now we delete the database every 6 months, so it's not there. There's nothing we can do. Oh well. And let's look at the mainstream media. Is there any kind of outrage? Is there any media outrage at all? Let's point out the fact that we are required to keep our tax returns for 7 years, and the IRS can't even keep emails for more than 6 months? Really? 7 years. I got to keep my tax returns in case they want to come in and poke their nose around my business. But I can't see what's going on with them for the same amount of time. Let's also ask the question, and this was asked from Buck Sexton. I was listening to his radio show this week. Does the IRS targeting of the Tea Party call into question the legitimacy of the Obama administration? Because the Tea Party could have had an effect on the election. So targeting these people, does that act of targeting actually call into question the legitimacy of his presidency? I would say probably does. The Tea Party is a big organization, and they have the ability to influence elections. And I think that targeting them could have potentially made people not want to get involved. They were concerned about getting audited and things like that. But anyway, I'd like to hear what you guys have to say about it. Give us a call. Next show, 619-924-0986. Or you can email us at talk@onthemoveshow.com. And with that said, I'd like to thank you guys for listening. About over. So, I want to thank you, our listeners, and the members of the Mack Pack for tuning in week after week. Also, I want to thank our special guest, Libertarian candidate Tim Turner, for joining us today. And if you want to get more information about the show, please check out our website, onthemoveshow.com. You can follow us here at blogtalkradio.com/onthemoveshow. You can like us on facebook.com/onthemoveshow. You can subscribe to us on Twitter at you can subscribe to us on YouTube at youtube.com/onthemoveshow, and follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/onthemoveshow. And as always, know your rights, assert your rights, and get on the move.